Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to the Reapplying to Medical School workshop. My name is Dr. John Taborn, and I'm on the pre-med advising and career counseling teams at the National Institutes of Health, Office of Intramural Training and Education, and I'll be leading you through today's workshop. I'm going to share my screen with you now. All right, again, welcome to the Reapplying to Medical School workshop. Today, we're going to work on thinking about, should I reapply to med school? That's a very important thing to think about. That's one of the first things that reapplicants consider. Also, before we talk about how to analyze your previous application, we also want to work a little bit about how to get yourself into the right or positive mindset for reapplicants to medical school. And that takes a little work, but we'll work on that today. We'll also create a plan, and we'll also factor into your plan a little bit about your wellness in the process. And also we'll learn how you can further work with OITE resources, as well as any resources you might have in your communities or schools. Okay. The first question is, should I reapply? And my answer is usually definitely think about it to a yes. And you'll kind of know more after you go through the evaluation process, but we're really having you really think about it. A couple of things just to know, that in reality, many applicants are not successful the first time you apply. So if you're coming right out of college and you're applying, or if you've been out of the workforce for a while, or you've been taking some bridge years off, you might think about, should I reapply? Definitely think about it. Also, just know it is a competitive process. And many med schools look very highly at reapplicants. That's the next thing for you to know, is that reapplicants, you actually have some things going for you already because you've already been through the cycle. You know what it's like, but now you have an opportunity to improve it. And that's what we're going to spend some time today working on, ways so you can start evaluating your application and showing improvement the next time. Okay. Again, how many people reapply? Well, these are some statistics from the 2018 entering class. And you know, out of the total number of applicants that have applied, 73% were first-time applicants. But note, almost 30%, 27% of applicants during that cycle were reapplicants. And so this is what we'll know for those of you that are considering applying next cycle or cycles after, that almost a third, 30% of applicants each cycle are reapplicants. And so you can do it too. Okay. And this is just another chart showing something similar, first-time repeat applicants. It's gone up over the number of years. This is starting back in 1980, and this was 2018-19. So again, you'll still want to be among that group to reapply. Okay, now I'm often asked, what are some of the most common reasons applicants reapply? According to AAMC, or the American Association of Medical Colleges, these are some of the top reasons that applicants reapply. They may have lower academic credentials, that means GPA, and for some reapplicants, they may not have known, but you're really looking at the science GPA, your BCPM, biology, chemistry, physics, math is what we're looking at, or med schools are looking at, primarily in terms of getting you prepared for medical school. Poor interview performance. So that's even after you've applied and submitted all your paperwork to AMCAS and secondaries and everything. You may have done well, but something was happening during the interview. Timing of your application submission. Okay, so some applicants may apply what we might consider later in the process and may not have had enough opportunities for schools to review your application in full. And so you want to consider applying earlier in the cycle. Weak exploration understanding of medicine, that kind of comes through your personal statements, maybe through your interview, where you might not really communicate to the medical school admissions that you really want to, why medical school is not only the right career for you, but what you've done to prepare yourself for medical school. I think that's one of the main things I would say about that. Poorly written essays, we can work on that, as well as school selection. Sometimes you might choose schools that are out of range or maybe too few schools, a variety of things to look at, okay? At NIH, among our pre-med advising team, here are a few things that we see that is notable. And note that we have applicants applying to all different branches of medical school, MD, PhD, DO schools, a variety of different, as well as some schools if you're applying to dentistry school and other professions. But Research emphasis. Sometimes applicants may have either too much emphasis on research and not enough explaining why you want to be a practitioner, why you want to practice medicine and be in direct care. Often clinical. What that means is applicants may need to have more direct patient care experience or shadowing hours and than what they are showing, or they haven't described it well in their application. Experience, meaning in terms of experience, it means have you had enough in the varieties of different kinds of experiences that medical schools are looking for? We'll talk a little bit about that. MCAT scores, they might be too low, they might need to retake it. Low science GPA we talked about. The interview. Often with personal statements, that's something we always see. You always want to work on reevaluating those and working on those, but sometimes the personal statements have not said enough about what you've done to prepare yourself to be a physician. Sometimes applicants during the process, it has to do with timing of when you apply. They might feel rushed and they might to apply because they're on a time schedule because they want to get started with graduate school or medical school. So they already know, applicants sometimes know that your application might have some weaknesses, but I'm just going to try it anyway and apply. And so you're kind of applying knowing or feeling in that process that you might be a little bit not up to par, and then you have to end up reapplying. That's quite often. The thing about it is next time we can always do more. School choice is important. Sometimes you apply to schools that might not be within range. Applying later in the cycle we mentioned. A big one is the AMCAS is not filled out well, meaning there's some ways that the AMCAS application could be filled out to make it much stronger, and often we see that quite frequently. Sometimes there's unpredictable events that occurred while you were applying during the process, and they may have caused you to not submit all your secondaries. They may have caused you to, it might have happened right before your MCAT, and you haven't realized the true impact of that event on your application. So those are some of the things that just happen kind of around that. And there's, of course, the reality that, well, I just didn't get in this cycle. I applied well, I did what I could. In this cycle, I may have even had interviews, but I just didn't get in this cycle. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't reapply to med school. It means try it again. A couple other factors that I would say noticing. A lot of applicants may or may not have had access to pre-med advising or may not have been able to utilize it. Some MD PhD applicants may not have had the information they need about applying to MD PhD programs, which is where you're applying to med school and a doctorate program. And it kind of goes, and they might need more information and coaching about that. Again, coaching is another thing. Coaching and support through the entire process is often very helpful. Not just did I get my application materials in, but preparation for interviews, support, and coaching through the almost year-long process is very helpful to have as you're going through this, and it kind of contributes to your wellness. You may have had competing applications that may not have allowed you to apply as strongly as what you like, so you need to take a bridge year or gap year to get those things going. Okay, so in general, how do reapplicants face this? There's like kind of three different ways. If you look at this as kind of a continuum, some of them are kind of like, feel like they're stuck and their heads are against a brick wall, kind of like, I can't move forward. Other ones see some ray of hope, which is symbolized by the purple iris here, kind of like, well, there's some hope here. Maybe I could do it. And then there's those that get right in and keep on going, like the swimmer going towards that goal. So our goal is to let you know by this image that there's a variety of different ways that people face it. I would encourage you to start moving from the brick wall more into towards the swimming end, and that's what we're going to help you do for the workshop today. Okay, the first thing we need to do before we do all this is take that deep breath for those of you that are reapplying and acknowledge, and I'm sure you have, that, wow, I will first of all say, even give yourself a round of applause. If you were in my workshops in person, I'd be having everybody give yourself a round of applause for going through the process and applying the first time. That is huge. You put a lot of effort into it. You put a lot of time, probably money and expenses, and physical, mental, psychological effort into this. And unfortunately, this time it didn't occur. So you're going to decide, are you going to reapply? And that right there, you might have conflicting thoughts. You might feel a little bit feelings of loss, some anger, some frustration, exhaustion, maybe a little hopelessness. For some of you, you're like, okay, I also felt on the other end of the spectrum, yeah, I think I'm ready to reapply. I know I can do some things better. So this workshop will benefit all of you along that spectrum, but it's important. But the main thing we want to do is to get in touch with any kinds of self-defeating or harmful thoughts or feelings that might get in the way this time, and work on those as you are and before you're reapplying. So you want to get in touch with how do you feel about reapplying, or about how to reframe some of these thoughts, and then keep checking into these as you go through the entire process. So these are typical. So I would ask you, if I'm in a workshop ordinarily, how do you feel about reapplying? So I'll pause for a couple seconds here and kind of think about how you feel about reapplying. And then I'll say, these are some common and typical feelings that many reapplicants have. Like I mentioned, concerned, they feel fearful, they're tired, exhausted, a variety of these. Also on this side, they're eager to get started, rushed, pressure to get going. There might be some other feelings that you might have. The main thing to know is that any and all of these are normal feelings to have, and they may come in waves. Some may come now, and throughout the process, they'll come and go, but just if you're trying to put them out of your mind or out of your feelings, it doesn't help as much as just embrace it and say, I'm reapplying and this is normal for me to feel that way. And I can still move forward. So how do we kind of get into this positive mindset? So one thing we work on is called cognitive reframing. We do a lot of this in our workshop. It kind of meets a little bit with, is a technique from cognitive and positive psychology, and it kind of gets you from not only thoughts, but into this wellness realm as you're even getting ready to reapply. And it's a technique where a person, you, can learn how to identify and consciously and intentionally shift your unhelpful and self-defeating frame of reference to a more positive one. Okay, so you're going to reframe unhelpful thoughts and turn them into positive thoughts. And how it helps reapplicants is because if you're trying to apply and reapply and you're having some of these negative thoughts that we'll give you some examples in a few meetings, you might be kind of defeating yourself throughout the whole process. Or if you can identify these and recognize when you're doing it and change them into positive, you'll feel more encouraged as you go through. So how do you identify them? The first thing is, and I usually have you take out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. If we're working in person, you can do that now, or you can refer back to the workshop later as we go through. But the first tip is to identify what the key issue is, because you can use this for other things. You could have fear or concerns about moving. You can have fear or concerns about which school you're going to apply to. You can have concerns about what lab you're going to take or whatever. In this workshop, we're focused on reapplying to med school. So you put that on top of, or professional school, you put that on top of the page. Then you start writing down thoughts, behaviors, and corresponding feelings. And then in the middle of that, you'd ask yourself, are these thoughts really true? And then sometimes you do work on yourself, because to you they might be true, but you might talk to other people and they might see you differently, or you might hear it differently. That's some of the work that we'll do a little bit today. And then secondly, after that, you take that same set of thoughts and you reframe them into more helpful thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And as you do that, you'll start seeing and feeling the shift. Let's look at a couple of examples. Okay. These are identifying thoughts, feelings, and behavior before, and I'll give you an example. And this is ones, again, that have to do with reapplying to med school. Here are some thoughts, and these are some thoughts that I've worked with students over the years on. Reapplicants are not competitive for med school, or med schools don't like reapplicants. And we're looking at the thoughts column. Also in the thoughts column, an advisor once told me you don't have what it takes to go to medical school. Choose another career. So taking the first realm, the corresponding feelings to reapplicants or not competitive med school are, you might have feelings of feeling defeated, shamed, lost an opportunity, or failed. Those are some heavy feelings there. And then the behaviors, like what do you do with those thoughts and feelings? Well, you might shut down, you might not reapply, you might postpone, you might not talk about it, you might avoid, things like that. And so if you're thinking about this all before you're reapplying, that's a lot to be thinking about, a lot of heaviness, and it might keep you kind of stuck. Let's bounce down to the next one. An advisor told me you don't have what it takes to go to med school. You might be feeling discouraged, angry, frustrated, ignored, overlooked, cheated, or lied to. Behaviors, you might still avoid, procrastinate, shut down. You might not choose to go to pre-med advising anymore. You might think, that's it, I'm not going. I work a lot with trainees like who had that said to them. You might take it on yourself to learn about the process independently, or ask others for opinions or advice, or apply anyway. All those are good things. The trick with those is sometimes you're applying and you don't have anybody to check in and check to make sure you are on the right track, or you won't have support through the process, okay? So on those two, let's look at how you'd be asking yourself, is that really true? Reapplicants are highly desired, reapplicants are not competitive for med school, or I don't have what it takes. You might say, well, let me check into that and see. And if there's a possibility it's true, which often it is, let's look at how you could reframe those so they're more self-encouraging. So they're not unhelpful, but they're helpful to you in the process. So reframed, reapplicants are not competitive for med school. Reframed is reapplicants are highly desired by med schools. And I just mentioned it today in the workshop. In fact, what do we know? 30% of applicants in any given year are reapplicants, and they get into med school. So they are highly desired. Also, the corresponding feelings with that would be more encouraged, motivated, engaged, and your behaviors are to prepare, get strategic, active, get involved, and reapply. Down here, when it says that they said, I don't, the pre-med advisor or an advisor once said, we don't have what it takes to go to med school. Revises, I do have what it takes to go to med school. I just need to think about my application differently, and maybe there's some things I'd like to do before I reapply. How can I make myself that way? With that, you're starting to feel more encouraged, positive, involved. And then behaviors are learn what else you need to do to get yourself there. Ask questions, attend pre-med workshops, do some counseling, consider post-bac programs, all kinds of things, which lead you from feeling procrastinating and shutting down to action on both ends. Let's just take a moment to look at a couple more. Here's some thoughts or feelings before, a few more. I don't have the MCAT score or science GPA to be successful. Those are the corresponding feelings. I feel a little helpless or ashamed. Behaviors, unstructured studying, procrastinating. Okay, down here, I'm not from a family of doctors, or I'm the first in my family to go to college or even go to grad school. There are very few in my ethnicity, gender, or race, who go to med school. I don't know anybody. Therefore, I don't know if I can do it. Pressure from family to succeed. My family wants me to do this, and I feel immense pressure. The thoughts are, I have to do this because my family wants me to do it. Corresponding feelings, look at all those that are there. Unwanted, revenge, unsure, a little bit of imposter. Some people might feel like this is a challenge, and they might be trailblazers and jump into it. Behaviors, study without a method or a group, study in isolation, don't reapply, all kinds of corresponding behaviors. And then the last one is I don't belong in med school. Then you have, that's kind of the imposter feelings or thoughts, not sought out, feeling without a community. Behaviors, avoid seeking information, don't reapply, or apply with less confidence, or some people apply in private, they don't tell people. Reframed, it looks a little bit different. The MCAT is only one part of a successful application, and I can take it at least 3 times, if not a few more times. So that's one of the things to know. You can retake the MCAT. You feel more engaged, active, motivated. You learn new study methods and get started. Med schools and patients desire to work with people who look like them, are like them, and therefore medical schools do want me. My family's encouraging me to seek med school. While it might feel pressure, it's really more encouragement. It might feel a little better. Then you have corresponding feelings, wanting, sought after, unique, strong. And your corresponding behaviors there are, you apply when you're at the strongest, you seek support from others, you even come to a reapplicant workshop. And the last one, I belong in med school. Med school has a place for me. You just feel encouraged, optimistic, hopeful. You seek out others like you who are applying or in med school, seek out help. look at how to apply stronger more next time, which is what we're talking about today. So I encourage you to take out a piece of paper and work on a feelings before and after, thoughts, feelings, and behavior before, and then reframed in your homework. But that will really help you, could help you in other areas. Okay, so this was, and there's a slide in here that'll show you how to do this on your own. Okay. Okay, let's move into the next part of the workshop. Oh, it's just kind of here, it's this little slide just has to do with, not everybody sees all the persistence and challenges it takes and get people to succeed. Failure or sacrifice and disappointment are all part of it, all a part of getting there. And so you can do this. So, okay, now, so let's move into the next part about evaluating your previous application. Keep in mind a few things as you're reapplying, and you may not have known this before. Medical schools use a holistic review of your application. So it's not only about MCAT scores. It's not only about your science GPA. It's about a whole host of things. And these are the things that I usually and a lot of advisors and admissions officers want you to focus on. First of all, before I do any of these, you clearly state in your personal statement that you want to be a physician. You don't imply it, you tell them that, okay? Next thing is you want to have an interest. Med schools like to see that you have an interest in the sciences, that you also have clinical exposure. That is, you've stepped into the work of a physician similar to what they do prior to applying. And that means shadowing, observing physicians, as well as trying out patient care, which I call here, for the sake of the workshop, direct patient care. Okay. They also want you to have leadership background. Medical doctors, MD, PhDs are leaders. They like to have you come with an understanding of yourself as a leader prior to applying to med school, then you just build upon it while you're there. Similar with clinical experiences. They also want to have experience and a value around service, research, and notice I'm putting at the end of this, then your MCAT scores and science GPA. All of this is what's looked at by admissions, by medical school admissions, not just one or two of these. So it's real important as you're starting to think about that, to put in your mind, this in your mind as you go through reapplying, okay? Also, the AAMC has some core competencies they'd like to see throughout your application that they use, and these are they, okay? These are a number of them. And so as you're looking at these different core competencies and you're looking at your previous application, you're getting ready to reapply, you want to see that these things are all you're demonstrating all these things to your application throughout your entire application. So what you can do as we go through is start making a list of things that you'd like to address before you reapply after we go through the workshop today. Okay, please note, please note here that the next application must be notably improved and different than the previous application. So for example, I have reapplicants and they'll say, do I need to change my 15 experiences? Do I need to change my personal statement? Do I need to change my secondary answers? The answer that I usually say is changing is important because A, you might have done some additional things since last time. And B, yes, it can only help you because you've reapplied and maybe we're not successful to do that. And C, if you apply to the same schools again, they're going to want to see that you've reapplied and looking at your whole application. So in general, I would say, yes, revisit everything, even if we update and tweak things a little bit differently. Finally, you'll know that you've reapplied and you know that you have significantly looked over your application and changed and updated it. So yeah, definitely make sure it's noticeably different. Okay, so step one in the reapplication process, in addition to going to a workshop like this, is to get some feedback from the previous application. Request feedback from admissions officers of some schools that you've applied to if you were offered an interview, or if you had screening or offered an interview, that can be helpful too, because they can give you feedback on your interviews. You can also, if you didn't have, or in addition to, get feedback on your previous application from pre-med advisors, which from us, as well as you might have a mentor or two that might give you some thoughts or comments. At OIT, we have pre-med advisors, and we can discuss, we like to see you discuss and share admissions feedback that you got from your admissions officers of the schools that you applied to and didn't get in. That's helpful to us to know that for any pre-med advisor. Also, we want to help you identify any weaknesses and discuss timing when to reapply. So whether you're at OITE, at NIH as a fellow, or you're joining us from other institutions or other programs, still get feedback and see if you can work with someone before you reapply, and I have some resources at the end. Okay, now, when you're going to look over and reapply, it's important to analyze, get out your previous AMCAS that you submitted, and we're gonna walk through how to evaluate that. And also, if you didn't submit an AMCAS and you submitted an AAMC or a Texas application, get those out as well. And there'll be similar areas. We want to make sure that you know how to kind of walk through reevaluating it. It's important that you get the verified AMCAS. Some applicants, many times their reapplicants didn't know what verified means. That means after you submitted it, AMCAS went through and they put in the page that has your science GPA and they calculated that out. Go and get that copy so you know what you're working with when you're getting ready to reapply. You want to read through the verified AMCAS, looking at everything from beginning to end, noting things like the MCAT score that you have, and noting if it seems a little low and you might want to retake it. Where med schools love to see upward trends. Also look at your 15 experiences. Also look at personal statements. Also look at your letters of recommendation. That's another question. Should we update those? You can update them, or you may have new ones that you want to add the next time you apply. So that's something. And also you want to look over and remember your secondary answers too. So this is something for you to look through, because it might be the questions, the way you answered your secondaries, you might want to revise and answer differently this time. And then bring your AMCAS and discuss with the OIT pre-med advisor or pre-med advisor at your institution and say, this is what you've done and you've noticed, what kind of things do they see? And then kind of go through that process, okay? So let's take a look at what some of the criteria, just for a review. For GPA, what's important to know is sometimes you might not know this. So when you're looking at your science GPA, note that these are the average science GPAs of applicants during the 2019 cycle across the country that were admitted. The average for the MD was 3.65, average for DO 3.54, average MT 3.75. The goal here, and you'll hear me say this again, is med schools, when you're reapplying, they like to see upward trends. So if you can show upward trends towards the mean in your science GPA, that's a sign that you are going to be improving that. Retake courses that are C- below, especially if they're prerequisite courses. We recommend taking courses at 4 years institutions. Many med schools will accept courses from community college, and those you might want to check in the MSAR to make sure they take courses from community college, so of the schools that you're interested in, so that you have those. Also at NIH, if you're enrolled here as a postbac, there are courses through FAES, and many med schools do accept those, or AMCAS does accept them. Check to make sure they're upper division undergraduate courses. And that's one of the things for a lot of you to know, is that med schools like to see that you've taken courses that are upper division undergrad courses. There are some programs that have graduate courses, but if you're thinking about it, if you can show an upward trend in your undergraduate science GPA, it might be, a lot of med schools prefer that. You might want to check with pre-med advisors about that, to talk about your planning for that. Also, you might want to consider looking into post-bac programs. These are programs that are designed for, there are several different types of them, that are designed to help you during what I call bridge years, to show improvements in different areas in terms of grades. If you're entering and you're a different career, underrepresented in medicine, or new or been out of medicine for a while. There are a variety of different kind of programs you can apply to, and those are actually wise investments of time if you really feel like you would benefit from that, to get you from reapplying to reapplying. Med schools like it because it's demonstrated proof that you have shown improvement. You might want to consider those. So as we see at the end here, the goal here is to convince or make a convincing argument to a medical school admissions committee that you can excel in rigorous, challenging upper division science curriculum and show a continued pattern of professional and self-improvement. That's something that they will look at. And this is one way to, only one way, or one of the ways to show it is through your GPA. Okay, let's look at MCAT scores. MCAT scores is another thing you might want to look at. To know the averages of MCAT scores last year is important. And by the way, same with science GPA. Many reapplicants and applicants look at these scores as that score I have to get me into med school. But notice it's an average or a mean. So there's a bell curve. So 511. So if you're like within the ranges of the bell curve, you should be okay. But if you like to raise those or bring those up, that shows the improvement towards the mean before you reapply. Okay. Again, you got to have a plan to do this. You can't just kind of sit back and let it happen. I think you want to sit down and look at what are the key things I need to do before you reapply, and then you set out to accomplish them. Okay. Also with the MCAT, you might want to look at the timing with the MCAT. In particular, in general, we usually recommend taking the MCAT by January because you're applying in June and you'd be able to take the MCAT, get your score back, and then if you feel like you want to retake it again, you have a few more months to retake it. This past year, due to the effects of COVID-19, many of the MCAT scores, many of the MCATs were rescheduled. So taking it early in the cycle can help you if possible. That was something unpredictable, one of those unpredictable things that we mentioned that may have happened that we'll find out about. But still, taking it earlier than pushing it up to the actual application date makes sense. Okay. These are just a few of the programs we have at NIH that we will run during the year for NIH participants. I won't spend much more time on that. Those of you that are NIH can take a look at those and see. You might look and see if there's any test prep courses through your school or through some of the private test prep companies if you feel as though that would be helpful to you. Okay, let's look at the AMCAS. Okay, so the AMCAS was your application, or the AACOMAS or the Texas TSDAS or whatever that you use if you apply to dental school. Here are some key things to take a look at when you're looking over your AMCAS. These are common things that I see a lot of us see when we review them. You want to make sure that all the questions are answered and there's no blanks. For example, when I look through applications, this is an example, like in your 15 experiences, they'll say, what was the institution or where did you do this? And you said, well, it was at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. And it says city, state, country, and then they're left blank. And they're left blank consistently because it might seem obvious. You might be thinking, well, they already know it's University of Minnesota in Twin Cities, so that's obviously United States. I don't need to fill it in. I recommend going back and filling everything in. So just don't leave any questions. It might be looked at as being sloppy or you didn't follow directions. So just very important. Those are some of the things that I noticed. Also, if you have a disadvantage or a hardship section or you didn't use one, you might want to look back and see if you need to revise that, or even ask questions about how those are written, if that feels like that's something that you would like to use in your application. If you had institutional actions, I have you revisit that with the pre-med advisor and confidentially. Sometimes with the institutional actions, you may not have written them with enough detail. And when I say detail, it's more about what you learned from it rather than I did it and it's over. They want to learn that middle part, like how have you grown, how have you changed? Because the best example of growth is if you can discuss that. So it's important that you do it you work on that a little bit more. Also looking over the coursework, we want to take a look at, do you need upward trends? Do you need to retake anything? Do you need to show an upward science GPA and update letters of rec? Okay. Some other things about the AMCAS is to look over all your 15 activities. okay? One thing about the 15 activities to pay attention to is for some applicants, you don't fill out all 15. And while it's not necessary to fill out 15 experiences, what is important is that you do fill out a good number of them to show the variety of different things that you're bringing, experiences that you're bringing to the medical school application. For example, I see some applicants that have stellar numbers, but only applied with 5 activities, all of them research. But when we went through what medical schools are looking for in terms of clinical and leadership and things like that, they didn't include them. And when I meet with them, they say, I had those, no one told me I should include those. So that's why we're doing the workshop today. So when you're reapplying, you can have that in your minds. Okay, so here's some of the things that we have you look at. For clinical experience, that's direct care. At NIH, we recommend having at least 150 hours. That's where you're working in a role similar to a physician. People get that through hospice, they get that through nursing, they get that through EMT work, some of them get medical assistant, any kind of experience where you actually have a patient in front of you and you're doing work with them similar to a physician. Shadowing is a little different. Shadowing is where you're observing, quite a bit different. Shadow is where you're, in med school's eye, we say about 80 hours, but that's where you're observing other physicians do the work. The idea when we say clinical experiences, you have both, clinical and shadowing. So you can say, not only do I observe physicians, I've actually tried this out. And therefore, what you're telling in your personal statement is, this is, I tried this workout and this is what I learned about myself while I'm doing this. Versus saying, I guess I can do this work. It's more important you can demonstrate it. That's what committees like to see. Leadership and teamwork is very important. I have a number of applicants that say, I didn't know leadership was important. Well, when you think about it and you look at the role that many physicians, MD, PhDs are taking in the world, you can look on TV, you can look in magazines, you're leaders. What's important is that, similar to clinical experience, is that you have shown that you got a leadership background and you understand your strengths and skills as a leader. And now you're going to bring them to med school and develop as a medical school leader in medicine. So that's something. Service, very important to medical schools, because really in medical school, you are training to serve the public, to serve people in terms of healthcare. And so if you have a value and experience with service, you can explain how important it is to you, that's wonderful. Research, very important, especially in MD, PhD programs. In meds, you're applying to medical school and not MD, PhD programs. This is important for med schools to understand that you understand research and how research, especially applies to and how the field of medicine benefits from research, and you understand that. If you're applying to MD, PhD programs, you're applying to MD, but also they want to see that you clearly have a solid foundation and understanding of the process of conducting scientific research. In fact, there's a whole additional essay devoted to that. And I add one in here, diversity and health disparities is important. And really what you're thinking about is, if you've applied, you've seen a lot of questions in secondaries, sometimes it's in the mission of the school. Do you have an understanding of disparities in health and science and research and in healthcare? Or have you got experience, and what might you do to enhance the inclusion and diversity mission of a med school are always questions. So if you have some kind of exposure and experience with that prior, it's good to have. It's not required, but it's good to have. You'll see the questions. So if you didn't work confident in your answers prior to that, then the next time you reapply, you can work on those. Okay. Let's see. So additional aspects of the activities and experiences include the things that are on here. Review and update, look at all 15 experiences, check for correct. These are some of the things that we recommend when we're looking at them. Check for correct categorization of the experience types. Because sometimes you'll put, for example, sometimes people will put shadowing, list everything is shadowing, but some of them you were doing direct patient care, but it's not listed under clinical experience, volunteer, medical clinical, or paid medical clinical. And that will help you decide that. And it might, so I think the one that's an example of, you want to look at what you're writing is categorized correctly under the categories you can use in the AMCAS. Okay. Also, for the most meaningful, make sure that you, for applicants, this is something that we see quite a bit, is most meaningful. It says there's 2 sections to fill out under most meaningful. Experience description, and then why it's most meaningful. And most meaningful does not mean always or only that it's meaningful to the patient or to the people that's recipient of that service or whatever you're doing. It's meaningful to you because you're the applicant to med school. This is how I grew, this is how I changed, this is how I developed. Some applicants, when they see this whole big block of most meaningful, they use the whole thing to describe it and never say why it's most meaningful. So those are some things to take a look at when you're evaluating yours. Also, like I mentioned, looking at the experiences, some of you might have too few or they're not diverse enough. The last thing about most meaningful I should have put above is sometimes people skip or miss the fact it says experience description. They just write only the most meaningful. There's two different places to fill in there. Look for typos. Also in the 15 experiences, this section is maybe better because it's so brief. It's better used describing the experience, describing what you learned very clearly, rather than telling a story. Like I met Jean, who was a 30-year-old, and this is what she felt, and I saw her cry. That's like writing another, it's in this section in the 15 experiences, it's easier for the committees to get what you say if you just answer it and go right to the point. And again, the experience type may not have matched the description. That's a little different than categorizing it. Sometimes the experience type will be leadership, but then you write in there all about service and never say anything about yourself as a leader. So you want to make sure all those match up. Okay. All righty, let's move on here. So this is just a review. If you haven't looked before, you want to look each year in case they change them a little bit in the wording. But this is the general different types you can use for AMCAS of experience types. And note, when you go to those sections, it says experience type and experience name. Experience type is like a pick list, and these are the ones you can choose from. Many reapplicants didn't know there were so many. They might have just only looked at a couple of these. Okay. Okay, and then here we have some recent changes to the activities that we can go through. There's some in terms of, they have a current gender identity you can look at for pronouns that you might use, biographical information, for your data separation if you select that you're military service, and then also for significant research for the MD PhD applicants, they'll ask you for the total number of hours prior of research that you're submitting. So there's some new things that you'll want to take a look at. There could be new ones for the next cycle that you apply. Okay. In terms of your essays for MD, DO, and MD, PhD, there's a few things to know. The main thing to make sure you know for MD is you explain to them, and I usually recommend explaining to them, well, I don't mean explaining to them, being very clear, often in the first paragraph, if you can, or very early on, that you want to be a physician. A lot of applicants get into writing the prose and say it at the end, or they never get to sing it at all. Or for example, they might say, I want to be in healthcare or caring, and never say you want to be a physician. Okay, what's important for the medical school to know is that you want to be a physician, and this is what you've done to prepare. So that they don't have you, because you could be caring in other professions. You could be a psychologist, a nurse, social services, public health, but they want to know you want to be a physician. So we recommend saying that. Also, we recommend, and you can look at some of our workshops, using a more persuasive approach to writing your personal statement. And that's a little different than narrative. Persuasive means it might get a little bit more, this is what motivated me to go be a doctor. That's good to use, but admissions also want to know, in addition to motivation, what have you done to prepare yourself to go to med school and become a physician? Where are you now? And that's where we get into, well, I've got clinical experience in leadership, and this is what I've done, my service, my research. I mean, it's a little different approach to say, I've done all these things, and I feel like now I'm ready, med school is my next step. That might be a little different approach to start thinking about using. For DO schools, sometimes for DO schools, what we see is applicants will talk about, I want to be a physician, but they never say and answer the question, why do you want to be an osteopathic physician? Why do you want to be a DO? What kind of training experience did you shadow DOs, and what was that like? you know, and may not even put that in your 15 experiences I shadowed a deal. Very important. For MD, PhD, we'll have a comment about that in a moment. Also, we want to look at grammatical errors, and if you have a lot in there about your personal background or development or family history, while med schools think that's important, and of course I do, if you can do it in a more abbreviated way so you can get to, and then in that context, this is what you've done to prepare yourself to med school, or after that context you have, I've gone on to do these kinds of things, then you're getting to it. Many applications in your personal statement is a lot about family or a personal experience that you have. You don't get at those things to be able to tell them, you know, what you've done to prepare yourself for med school. And that's one of the things that can happen sometimes. Also, look over all your secondaries as well. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, yes, for MD, PhD essays, as mentioned, I was going to say we're going to get to this. There are a few things to know if you're reapplying or considering applying to MD, PhDs. In MD, PhD applications, sometimes there's 3 essays. The MD, why do you want to be a physician and what have you done to prepare? Why do you want an MD and a PhD? And then tell us about your research. 3 different essays. In MD, PhD applications, often the MD essay sounds a lot like you want to be a researcher. So you want to pay attention to make sure what I would even recommend going to a how to write a personal statement for med school workshop and write that for med school. That one should focus mostly on why you want to be a physician and practice medicine. Okay. For the MD, PhD essay, a lot of times for MD, PhD, it goes into a lot into why you want to be a physician scientist, but you need to have something in there that explains why you want, or why and how in your future career you want to be a physician and care for patients. So often you have to come back and say it. We recommend coming back and saying it again in the context of I want to be a physician and a researcher. That's why I want to be both. So it's like a separate essay from the MD essay. And the third one, research, a lot of times in that one, the research, you want to go through and explain your research in more detail, going from the big picture to the research questions, and then explain the results and how they apply to the bigger picture. For example, and sometimes the MD or the research essays get a lot into the technical details of how you do the research, but may not explain what the research question was. So a person or an applicant, the admissions committee who are reading the PhD essays want to understand that you understand research and the process of conducting a research experiment. And that would be for you to explain for each research experience. This is the lab I was in, or the department I was in, this is the PI, this is the major research of that lab. The next part is my project was this, and this is the research question I was looking at. This is the methods or methodology I went about to examine or test out and come to a conclusion about that research question. These are the results you got, and most importantly, you explain how the results are important to the larger field. That's something that we have feedback that many applicants don't do. They just said, I got results, and then they move on. They need to know that you understand that. And then also, finally, if you had an opportunity to present to audiences of scientists and publish, those are good things to have. Describing each research experience like that you have, or if you have to choose a couple of them, is good. So it is good because then they know you have a strong foundation in research. Similar to you have a strong foundation and tried out the field of medicine, you have a strong foundation and tried out the field of research. Okay, and then rather than coming in as a novice and haven't tried either one, we recommend that you have that for both, so that when you're applying, then the committees will know, okay, this person really understands research. Let's move them forward in the process. Okay. Let's see, letters of recommendation. We recommend that you revisit your choice of letters. You might have chosen, the first time you applied, you might have chosen the letter writers that you have. But sometimes after you hear the different experiences, sometimes applicants will submit all research letters at NIH because we're research, but they haven't submitted a letter from someone that can talk to them about their clinical work. That might be one you want to add. Or their letters for research are from undergrad and not from their post-bac or their post, experience. They might want to have someone as a leader. So you want to take a look at the letters you wrote before and see, are there any you want to update or change? That's important to do when you reapply. That can be helpful. These are some of the comments. Also for DO school, you might want to see if you can get a letter from a DO. That would be important for you to take a look at. Okay, real good. Okay, so for the selection of programs, some of you may not have got the MSAR, that's the medical school admissions requirements. It comes out every year. Utilize that to take a look. That is very good for looking at the schools, the means of MCAT and science GPA, and other details that you need to know about what that school accepts from the prior year. Also, look into your personal criteria. If you can look into both of those, then you're able to make a little bit wiser choice. We also recommend you apply to at least 15 schools. Some applicants, for a lot of very understandable reasons, apply to only schools that are within their state or within their region. And I worked with a broad variety and understand it. Sometimes it has to do with wanting to stay close to family, cultural, affordability, all kinds of things. But know that there are a number of med schools, and they might have more seats in other states or other med schools, and it also broadens and opens up more opportunities for you to be interviewed. Okay. So if you look at the MSAR, look at the number of schools you're applying to, and all your personal criteria. Personal criteria might be, I want to be able to be trained to work with urban populations, or rural, or border, or what you might look and see what and how you'll be trained in each medical school. That might help you make a closer match to a good school that you might want to apply to. So putting all those together. Okay, good. And then secondaries. Always revisit your secondaries. I mean, we know that you can pre-write secondaries. Some things that we notice are things like this. Also, many applicants each year will say the diversity question in secondaries. When I'm looking at them, and I'd encourage you to look at, to make sure that you're not submitting the same answer to the diversity question, because in reality, the diversity question kind of doesn't exist in a way. Each school might write a question that sounds like you're talking about a diversity and inclusion kind of question, but it could be a different kind of question. One school might say, talk about how you're diverse and what you'll bring to enhance the diversity and inclusion mission of our university, of our med school. Another diversity might say something about, tell us about a time that you had something, and adversity happened, or you were in an experience where you experienced adversity, and how did you handle that? And many applicants assume that that's a diversity question, and it may or may not be, depending on your experience of adversity. But adversity doesn't always mean diversity. It might be something else. So you want to take a look at each question and revisit those and make sure, what are they asking, and am I answering this from that perspective? They'll give you a whole number of characters you can use. You don't have to use all the characters, but you can use some of them as long as it's clear and it gets across. Some applicants are not sure what to do when it says, is there anything else that you wish to add? They're saying, do I have to add anything if I don't have anything else? You don't have to, it's optional. I just recommend writing the answer, no, I don't have anything to add. If you leave it blank, they might assume, I wonder if this applicant had something to say and they left it blank. I think it's better just to answer the question. From this year, there might be secondary questions talking about what did you do how did the COVID-19 experience affect you? It may be that question shows up again next year. We don't know, but it's important that you answer it, because it could have been something affected you. Maybe you were able to do your research, your shadowing experiences were cutting back, and hours, whatever, and then you say what you did kind of in that time instead. It's important to answer that. So you might want to revisit that question and think about how you'd approach answering. Okay, a couple notes on interviews for reapplicants. Again, if you interviewed, that's a wonderful thing. And if you are on wait lists, it's even a wonderful thing plus because the schools have noticed you and are considering you for medical school. And even if you haven't gone to that process, still reapply. But if you did have interviews, here's some things you can request. And many med schools will give you some feedback. Ask the admissions committees if they have any comments or can talk to you about what can make your application stronger, and include interview. They might be noticing things during your interview that would be helpful for you to know. Also think about to yourself, how did you feel during the interviews? Did you feel confident, nervous? Did you feel a little sick or detached? Also, are there any questions you'd like to practice again? Also, I would have, when I'm doing a mock interview or preparing reapplicants, I'd say, the last time, were there any questions that you felt unsure how to ask, or any questions that felt a little uncomfortable? Because sometimes in that interview, you might get a question from one of the interviews that felt inappropriate or something, and you want to get that off your chest and figure out how you might respond to that should it come up again. Also, know the structures for the various types of interviews, and this year will be important if you're reapplying this year, to know if they're going to be virtual interviews or not. In general, medical school interviews are more traditional interviews where they're asking you questions like, why do you want to be a doctor? You know, what is your choice in med school? What are your strengths and weaknesses? MMI are multi-mini interview questions. And many applicants went into the cycle and didn't really know what those are, how to prepare for those. So that's going to be important. This cycle, because of COVID-19, many schools are using virtual interviews. And they're going to be conducting them on Zoom. So preparing yourself for how to interview on Zoom is going to be very important. Okay, and then also they might be using some form of video interviewing as well, where you're going to be videotaping your answers. Okay, for MD, PhD applicants, we recommend that you are practicing the MD interviews and MMI interviews, and how to discuss your research. So, because you may be asked to respond to all three different kinds of interviews, and getting practice with those in advance will be very helpful to you. So, we've been through, and I've discussed a lot of things rather quickly, so I encourage you, if you would like to re-listen to kind of what we've said so far, or at least look through the slides again. But you want to come up with a plan. Now that you've kind of evaluated everything, you got yourself into a good mindset, and now you've thought through and evaluated everything, you got feedback, and now you're ready, you decided, I'm going to reapply, so what's my plan? So you want to look at what are the specific things that you'd like to do before you reapply, and I recommend putting them down on a piece of paper. If you need to retake your MCAT, if you need to show an upward trend, if you want to work on your clinical experience, write each one down, and then look at, write each task down, the methods you're going to use, how am I going to get there, and the date that you're going to have that due, so it's done before you reapply, rather than I'm going to get this stuff done, I'm almost done with it, but I'm going to apply anywhere and get it afterwards, is important. And then you want to choose the date that you're going to reapply, and that would be, are you applying in June 2021 or 2022? Choose a date, and that's important to take a look at. You can start crossing off, and then from there you can work backwards and look at when you need to get things done. The last thing I would do is add wellness to your plan. There's something I meant to say about choosing reapplication date. In general, we usually have people apply between June and October. Early is the month of June. The earlier, and to a little bit into midway is probably mid-July to mid-August, and a little bit later is going to be September and October. The reasons why is it takes sometimes 3 or 4 weeks to get AMCAS to verify your application before you can send them out. So the earlier you apply, the more opportunities you have to get it verified sooner, and then your application sent out and your secondaries to come back so your application is complete. This year and in years past, interviews have started as early as August. So if you're applying in August or September, while not late, you might not have as many opportunities to get your application reviewed as much. And finally, what I'll say is, even if you do, don't worry. Not all the interviews are selected in June, July, and August up until the end of March. They're selected. You've probably seen, if you reapplied, you might get invited for interviews in October, November, December, January, February, even March. So sometimes that's something people didn't know. They feel like, oh, I didn't get selected for interviews because I didn't get everything in on time. You'll still have opportunities. We just want to make sure you have the most opportunities to get as many possibilities as possible. Okay. All right. So it's a little bit of what I just said already. What cycle is best to reapply? It's tough for reapplicants because you want to stay on track. You want to keep up with colleagues. Important is to know is reapply when you feel strongest and that you feel that you've improved over last time. So don't try to be in a rush. It's better that you show that. Schools like to see the time spent, demonstrated time spent on re-improving your application. You can also, if you're taking 6 months to show improvements, different than applying right away and not showing any improvement for med schools, admissions eyes. So they want to see that demonstrated improvement, okay? And this is something, this chart again is explaining the AMCAS verification time. So, you know, this is why you want to apply a little bit sooner so that you get your application done. This is how to evaluate, are you ready to reapply? Am I in the right mindset? Do I have that positive mindset? Am I working on that? I'm followed through on my reapplication plan. Can I submit an improved application? This says 2020. So now we're going to say 2021 or going forward. Will you need a bridge or gap year needed? Will I need a little more time? If you do, it's good to have that in mind so you know this is what my plan is. So when people ask, what are you doing? You're not filling a gap. You're building your bridge to med school. So I'm taking courses, I'm doing my clinical, so that when I reapply, I will be ready, okay? And these are some other things you might want to consider. This one says, consider different additional career possibilities. I do work with a lot of applicants with that who might be reevaluating career possibilities. I think it's important to do that, work with a career counselor to look at a variety, because there's a variety of careers in healthcare. You can be a nursing, you can be a PA, you can be a dentist, you can be any kind of field, but reevaluating at this time in your life might help make sense. Often it comes back to, yeah, I think I'm on track for med school, but sometimes you might choose a different path. I've had some applicants that say, well, I'd really like to go into business first and then apply at that time. Well, that's good. We just need to know, put your plan together for how you want to do that. So working with a career counselor, if you have questions about that, it's a good idea, but still part of your plan and considering reapplying. Okay, a note on wellness. This is important to think about your wellness as you are reapplying, and even through this whole reapplying process. If you're feeling stressed, a lot of different things can help, will really have an impact on your ability to apply strong and apply well. At NIH, we have this wellness model that we look at that takes a look at 4 different components of wellness: your body, mind, heart, and spirit. And it has to do with being aware of how all those things intertwine and work together, and creating a self-care, and you're caring for self through the process. So if you're losing sleep through this process and you haven't had a lot of sleep and you're getting ready to go take your MCAT, that's going to affect kind of your mind, body, and spirit. So you want to kind of take those things into consideration. We do a lot of wellness programming through NIH OITE that you've probably seen or you can see on the website, on our YouTube page. You might want to take a look at some of these resources we have here. Also at the bottom, if you are part of our, joining us from other institutions, or you're not at the NIH and working or considering reapplying, looking at what resources in your institutions or communities is also very helpful. For reapplying, the last thing down here is to find an advisor. NAHAP, which is our National Association of Advisors in Health Professions. There is a link that I put on here. You can go to the website, NAAHP.org to, it says there's a link to find an advisor. You might be able to find someone who volunteer time to help and work with you. That can be helpful. Okay, and I think this slide here is a little bit out of order, so I apologize for that. These are just some other possible careers in health professions that you might consider. Okay, so you can make a contribution and work with patients in healthcare settings. It may or may not be you choose to be a physician. The patients who will be working with you in any of these professions will really benefit from working with you, and hopefully you benefit from working with them as well. Okay, so we recommend if you're at NIH scheduling an appointment with an advising team. This is our team here if you're in your own institutions. We recommend looking into who are the pre-med advisors. In some college universities, their pre-med advisors are in the Career Center or in the Health Advising Center, or you might be referred into for community resources for that. Some might even be for your CAPS. You want to just take a look at that. And if you're in the community, you might have additional resources you can utilize. Okay. This is just a slide here that of a poem that is usually helpful to many reapplicants that I use, that just kind of encourage you not, you might think that you're beaten or defeated, but you really aren't. And some of the strategies that we use today might help you kind of put yourself in a different mindset and get yourself ready to reapply. So thank you very much for coming today, and we hope you enjoyed the workshop. And I truly hope that there's resources and tips and thoughts for reevaluating, considering reapplying are going to be helpful to you. Thank you, and have a good day.